The following program is brought to you in conjunction with the folks at Grace to All with Paul Gray. Now we bring to you the Agape Guy Show with your host, Lenny Manning.
I'm banking everything on love. I'm banking everything on love.
Hello and welcome to the Agape Guy Show's Christmas Special. I'm your host, Lenny Manning. Since it's the season of the year where we celebrate Christmas and a few other holidays, let's have a story. I like to share inspirational Christmas stories. For many young folks and those who are young at heart, Christmas is a magical time. It's a time that reminds us that perhaps miracles can still happen. So some children wish for a certain toy or a bicycle. It might even make many of us adults consider that maybe miracles can still happen. Even the hard-hearted folks might think that maybe, just maybe, a miracle can happen that might make their life better. Maybe a miracle could relieve a bit of their hardships in life, perhaps. Sometimes things do happen in our lives that give us a bit of help. Maybe it doesn't always happen in the exact way we wanted or expected, but sometimes good things do happen. Those good things can seem so great that it almost brings a tear to our eyes. Well, for the last few years, I've shared inspirational stories around the holidays. I usually share them between Thanksgiving at the end of November all the way through December. I'd like to share a few of those stories with you folks. Now, some of these might be short stories that are only 1 or 2 sentences. Some others are a bit longer, and they can be a few paragraphs or a few pages. I've also done a little bit of research and found that there used to be a tradition in Europe of telling stories at the holidays. People would gather around the fireplace or gather in the living room to tell stories. It was also considered that a great story was just as good as giving a great Christmas gift. This was done long before they invented radios and televisions in the 20th century. So reading or telling stories was very fun and entertaining. So for this episode of the show, I'd like to share 1 or 2 inspirational stories. I'm also going to have a special narrator who will narrate the stories. Here's our special guest narrator. Hello, Mr. Narrator.
Hello, everybody. I hope all of you have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. Let's all gather together and let me tell you a story. This story is called Christmas Eve, 1942, and it's by Harvey Patterson. It was Christmas Eve, 1942. I was 15 years old and feeling like the world had caved in on me because there just hadn't been enough money to buy me the hunting rifle that I wanted for Christmas. We did the chores early that night for some reason. I just figured Daddy wanted a little extra time so we could read in the Bible. After supper was over, I took my boots off and stretched out in front of the fireplace and waited for Daddy to get down the old Bible. I was still feeling sorry for myself, and to be honest, I wasn't in much of a mood to read scriptures. But Daddy didn't get the Bible. Instead, he bundled up again and went outside. I couldn't figure it out because we had already done all the chores. I didn't worry about it long, though. I was too busy wallowing in self-pity. Soon he came back in. It was a cold, clear night out, and there was ice in his beard. "Come on, Matt," he said. "Bundle up good. It's cold out tonight." I was really upset then. Not only wasn't I getting the rifle for Christmas, now he was dragging me out in the cold, and for no earthly reason that I could see. We'd already done all the chores, and I couldn't think of anything else that needed doing, especially not on a night like this. But I knew he was not very patient at one dragging one's feet when he told them to do something. So I got up and put my boots back on and got my coat. Mommy gave me a mysterious smile as I opened the door to leave the house. Something was up, but I didn't know what. Outside, I became even more dismayed. There in front of the house was the work team already hitched to the big sled. Whatever it was we were going to do wasn't going to be a short, quick little job. I could tell. We never hitched up this sled unless we were going to haul a big load. Daddy was already up on the seat, reins in hand. I reluctantly climbed up beside him. The cold was already biting at me. I wasn't happy. When I was on, Daddy pulled the sled around the house and stopped in front of the woodshed. He got off, and I followed. "I think we'll put on the high sideboards," he said. "Here, help." The high sideboards? It had been a bigger job than I wanted to do with just the low sideboards on, but whatever it was we were going to do would be a lot bigger with the high sideboards on. Then Daddy went into the woodshed and came out with an armload of wood. The wood I'd spent all summer hauling down from the mountain, and then all fall sawing into blocks and splitting. What was he doing? Finally I said something. I asked, "What are you doing?" "You been by the widow Jensen's lately?" he asked. Mrs. Jensen lived about 2 miles down the road. Her husband had died a year or so before and left her with 3 children, the oldest being 8. Sure, I'd been by, but so what? "Yeah," I said. "Why?" "I rode by just today," he said. "Little Jakey was out digging around in the woodpile trying to find a few chips. They're out of wood, Matt." That was all he said, and then he turned and went back into the woodshed for another armload of wood. I followed him. We loaded the sled so high that I began to wonder if the horses would be able to pull it. Finally, he called a halt to our loading. Then we went to the smokehouse, and he took down a big ham and a side of bacon. He handed them to me and told me to put them in the sled and wait. When he returned, he was carrying a sack of flour over his right shoulder and a smaller sack of something in his left hand. "What's in the sack?" I asked. "Shoes. They're out of shoes. Little Jakey just had gunny sacks wrapped around his feet when he was out in the woodpile this morning. I got the children a little candy, too. It just wouldn't be Christmas without a little candy." We rode the 2 miles to Mrs. Jensen's pretty much in silence. I tried to think through what Daddy was doing. We didn't have much by worldly standards. Of course we did have a big woodpile, though most of what was left now was still in the form of logs that I would have to saw into blocks and split before we could use it. We also had meat and flour, so we could spare that. But I knew we didn't have any money, so why was he buying them shoes and candy? Really, why was he doing any of this? Widow Jensen had closer neighbors than us. It shouldn't have been our concern. We came in from the blind side of the Jensen's house and unloaded the wood as quickly as possible. Then we took the meat and flour and shoes to the door. We knocked. The door opened a crack, and a timid voice said, "Who is it?" "Lucas Miles, ma'am, and my son Matt. Could we come in for a bit?" Mrs. Jensen opened the door and let us in. She had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The children were wrapped in another and were sitting in front of the fireplace by a very small fire that hardly gave off any heat at all. Mrs. Jensen fumbled with a match and finally lit the lamp. "We brought you a few things, ma'am," Daddy said, and set down the sack of flour. I put the meat on the table. Then he handed her the sack that had the shoes in it. She opened it hesitantly and took the shoes out one pair at a time. There was a pair for her and one for each one of the children. Sturdy shoes, the best, shoes that would last. I watched her carefully. She bit her lower lip to keep it from trembling, and then tears filled her eyes and started running down her cheeks. She looked up at my daddy like she wanted to say something, but it wouldn't come out. "We brought a load of wood too, ma'am," he said, then turned to me and said, "Matt, go bring in enough to last a while. Let's get that fire up to size and heat this place up." I wasn't the same person when I went back out to bring in the wood. I had a big lump in my throat, and as much as I hate to admit it, there were tears in my eyes too. In my mind, I kept seeing those 3 kids huddled around the fireplace and their mother standing there with tears running down her cheeks, with so much gratitude in her heart that she couldn't speak. My heart swelled within me, and a joy that I'd never known before filled my soul. I had given at Christmas many times before, but never when it had made so much difference. I could see we were literally saving the lives of these people. I soon had the fire blazing and everyone's spirits soared. The kids started giggling when Daddy handed them each a piece of candy, and Mrs. Jensen looked on with a smile that probably hadn't crossed her face for a long time. She finally turned to us. "God bless you," she said. "I know the Lord has sent you. The children and I have been praying that He would send one of His angels to spare us." In spite of myself, the lump returned to my throat and the tears welled up in my eyes again. I never thought of my daddy in those exact terms before, but after Widow Jensen mentioned it, I could see that it was probably true. I was sure that a better man than Daddy had never walked the earth. I started remembering all the times he had gone out of his way for Mommy and me, and many others. The list seemed endless as I thought on it. Daddy insisted that everyone try on the shoes before we left. I was amazed when they all fit, and I wondered how he had known what sizes to get. Then I guessed that if he was on an errand from the Lord, that the Lord would make sure he got the right sizes. Tears were running down Widow Jensen's face again when we stood up to leave. My daddy took each one of the kids in his big arms and gave them a hug. They clung to him and didn't want us to go. I could see that they missed their daddy, and I was glad that I still had mine. At the door, he turned to Widow Jensen and said, "The missus wanted me to invite you and the children over for Christmas dinner tomorrow. The turkey will be more than the 3 of us can eat, and a man can get cantankerous if he has to eat turkey for too many meals. We'll be by to get you about 11. It'll be nice to have some little ones around again. Matt here hasn't been little for quite a spell." I was the youngest. My 2 brothers and 2 sisters had all married and had moved away. Mrs. Jensen nodded and said, "Thank you, Brother Miles. I don't have to say, 'May the Lord bless you.' I know for certain that He will." Out in the sled, I felt a warmth that came from deep within, and I didn't even notice the cold. When we had gone a ways, Daddy turned to me and said, "Matt, I want you to know something. Your mother and me have been tucking a little money away here and there all year long so we could buy that rifle for you, but we didn't have quite enough. Then yesterday a man who owed me a little money from years back came by to make things square. Your mom and me were real excited, thinking that Now we could get you that rifle, and I started into town this morning to do just that. But on the way, I saw little Jakey out scratching in the woodpile with his feet wrapped in those gunny sacks, and I knew what I had to do. Son, I spent the money for shoes and a little candy for those children. I hope you understand. I understood, and my eyes became wet with tears again. I understood very well, and I was so glad Daddy had done it. Now the rifle seemed very low on my list of priorities. He had given me a lot more. He had given me the look on Mrs. Jensen's face and the radiant smiles of her 3 children. For the rest of my life, whenever I saw any of the Jensens or split a block of wood, I remembered, and remembering brought back that same joy I felt riding home beside of my daddy that night. He had given me so much more than a rifle that night. He had given me the best Christmas of my life. Wow, stories like that really get to your heart and almost bring a tear to your eye, don't they? I think we might have time for another story. Several years ago, a woman had a friend named Joe, and Joe's husband didn't make much money. They didn't have much money to spend on Christmas gifts at all. Joe had a son who was convinced that he would be getting a bicycle for Christmas because he had been good all year long. This young guy didn't want just any old bike, but he wanted a yellow one. The young boy knew his parents might not be able to afford it, so he encouraged them and told them not to worry because Santa would bring him one. Now, Miss Joe's sister and her son lived with her, and as it turned out, that year her sister's son was getting a red bike. Then on Christmas Eve, Miss Joe's mom visited them, and Joe told her mom how her son wanted a yellow bike. She also told her mom that they didn't have the money to buy a bike, but Joe's sister was giving her son a red bike. Joe's mom then said, "You can't let that happen. That boy won't understand why Santa brought a bike for his cousin, but couldn't bring one for him." Joe's mom then got her purse and wallet and handed Joe a handful of cash and said, "Take this and get him that bike." Joe was afraid that many of the stores had already closed or were about to close, so she didn't know if she could get a bike at all. So Joe called the only bike store in town that she knew about, and she asked if they had any more boys' bikes left. A man had answered the phone, and when the man heard her ask if there were any boys' bikes left, he told her there was only one. Then he sheepishly said, with an apologetic tone in his voice, "But it's yellow." I think it turned out that the amount of money she needed to buy the bike was the exact amount that her mom had given her. So the way it turned out seemed like it was a bit of a Christmas miracle. Now, I can't guarantee everybody gets exactly what they want in the exact way they want it. Sometimes God has some interesting plans. Yet as Wayne Jacobson has mentioned, we can learn about God's love in the midst of life's turmoil. Sometimes we can even learn to see God's love in spite of life's rough circumstances. I also know that many people get depressed around the holidays for many heartbreaking reasons. I can honestly tell you that my heart goes out to those folks. Even though I have learned a lot about God's love, I still have plenty of difficulties in life too. I guess that's something we all have to deal with to one degree or another, since we live in a universe that's mostly run by entropy. Yet sometimes we can pray and bend those laws of physics sometimes. It doesn't always happen or happen the way we want, but it does happen sometimes. I think we might have time for another story. This is a first-person account from a mother about her family as they ate dinner on Christmas Day in a small restaurant many miles from their home. The mother relays this to us. We were the only family with children in the restaurant. I sat Eric in a high chair and noticed everyone was quietly eating and talking. Suddenly Eric squealed with glee and said, "Hi there!" He pounded his fat baby hands on the high chair tray. His eyes were wide with excitement, and his mouth was bared with a toothless grin. He wiggled and giggled with merriment. I looked around and saw the source of his merriment. It was a man with a tattered rag of a coat, dirty, greasy, and worn. His pants were baggy with a zipper at half-mast, and his toes poked out of would-be shoes. His shirt was dirty, and his hair was uncombed and unwashed. His whiskers were too short to be called a beard, and his nose was varicose. It looked like a road map. We were too far from him to smell, but I was sure he smelled. His hands waved and flapped on loose wrists. "Hi there, baby. Hi there, big boy. I see you, Buster," the man said to Eric. My husband and I exchanged looks. What do we do? Everyone in the restaurant noticed and looked at us and then at the man. The old geezer was creating a nuisance with my beautiful baby. Our meal came, and the man began shouting from across the room. "Do you know patty cake? Do you know peekaboo? Hey, look, he knows peekaboo." Nobody thought the old man was cute. He was obviously drunk. My husband and I were embarrassed. We ate in silence, all except for Eric, who was running through his repertoire from the admiring Skid Row bum, who in turn reciprocated with his cute comments. We finally got through the meal and headed for the door. My husband went to pay the check and told me to meet him in the parking lot. The old man sat poised between me and the door. "Lord, just help me let out of here before he speaks to me or Eric," I prayed. As I drew closer to the man, I turned my back, trying to sidestep him and avoid any air he might be breathing. As I did, Eric leaned over my arm, reaching with both arms in a baby's pick-me-up position. Before I could stop him, Eric had propelled himself from my arms to the man's. Suddenly, a very old smelly man and a very young baby consummated their love relationship. Eric, in an act of total trust, love, and submission, laid his tiny head upon the man's ragged shoulder. The man's eyes closed, and I saw tears hover beneath his lashes. His aged hands, full of grime, pain, and hard labor, gently, so gently, cradled my baby's bottom and stroked his back. No two beings have ever loved so deeply for so short a time. I stood awestruck. The old man rocked and cradled Eric in his arms for a moment, and then his eyes opened and set squarely on mine. He said in a firm, commanding voice, "You take care of this baby." Somehow I managed, "I will," from a throat that contained a stone. He pried Eric from his chest unwillingly, longingly, as though he were in pain. I received my baby, and the man said, "God bless you, ma'am. You've given me my Christmas gift." I said nothing more than a muttered thanks. With Eric in my arms, I ran for the car. My husband was wondering why I was crying and holding Eric so tightly, and why I was saying, my God, forgive me." I had just witnessed Christ's love shown through the innocence of a tiny child who saw no sin, who made no judgment, a child who saw a soul, and a mother who saw a suit of clothes. I was a Christian who was blind, holding a child who was not. I felt it was God asking, "Are you willing to share your son for a moment?" when he shared his for eternity? The ragged old man unwittingly had reminded me, to enter the kingdom of God, we must become as little children. Author unknown, contributed by Mike Huggins. Right now, let's go back to the host of the show. Take it away, Lenny.
Wow, those are great stories. If these stories don't bring a tear to your eye, then you need to check your pulse. Have you ever had a situation like that where God revealed his character and his love, especially to the most unlikely people or through the most unlikely people, like that young child? Well, I think our time is almost up and we're near the end of the show. But before we go, let me say one thing. If you have the financial means this holiday season, please consider giving to charity in one way or another. Please consider folks like the Salvation Army with their red buckets, the Red Cross, Toys for Tots, Project Angel Tree, Operation Christmas Child, or maybe a local orphanage. You might even consider a reputable charity to help victims of the many natural disasters that hit around the world over this past year. If you feel led to help me and the Agape Guy show, please buy a copy of my book about my life on Amazon's website. The book is called Journal to a Journey. My Life is More Than Wishes and Dreams. I'll put up a QR code so you can find it. If you buy a copy, it'll financially help me a lot. I've also noticed that the folks who have read my book have found it to be helpful in their lives as well. As for now, I wish you all a Merry Christmas, and I hope you all have a magnificent holiday and a great New Year. I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye for now.
I'm banking everything on love. I'm banking everything on love. I see the flags unfurl and they're blowing the other way. I see the anchor rising and the ship moving.